Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes is demanding the Justice Department do more to protect poll workers. In an interview with Rolling Stone this month, Fontes expressed frustration with the Department of Justice and the Biden administration over the issue. Now, Fontes told the magazine, as cautious a person as Attorney General Merrick Garland is, I think he is being far too cautious here when it comes to these investigations and prosecutions of threats against election administrators and election workers. Arizona is one of several states that have seen a surge in threats against election workers. Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes joins us now. Greetings to you, sir. Thank you for being with us on the weekend. Let's start where we ended in Rolling Stone. What specifically do you think the Justice Department should be doing here as it relates to election workers?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and we'll get straight to it. I think more robust investigation of many of the threats that we've seen, and not just sort of giving short shrift to what these threats are, and giving a little bit more weight to the intimidation factor of these threats versus some of the sort of what law enforcement deems actionable. Second, I think it's very important that the Department of Justice be very, very straightforward about the prosecutions that they've had. We live in a country of 330 plus million people with 50 states and a bunch of territories, tens of thousands of threats that we've seen, and only 12 prosecutions as far as we can tell right now. That's not enough. Moreover, I think once the prosecutions happen and convictions occur, the department needs to celebrate these as a deterrent effect for future threats and future potential violence against elections officials. Remember, elections administrators, these folks, they weave the golden thread that holds that fabric of our society together. Without elections and competent election administrators doing these jobs, the whole of our society falls apart. So my urgency speaks to the fundamental basics of our society, not just folks that I know as competent professionals who are doing their job in some very difficult circumstances.
Secretary Fontes, your state, Arizona, has been hit particularly hard by this. You have one of the highest turnover rates of election workers in this country. I wonder, when you talk to your colleagues, other secretaries of state, if they share your assessment of the DOJ.
Well, they certainly share my concern about the turnover. Look, if you've got elections officials who have been doing these jobs for decades, that experience going away is difficult to replace, particularly when we're already this close to the next presidential election. And many states are already going through their primaries and planning for the rest of what's going to happen in 2024. So that experience going out the door, add on the scrutiny, add on the threats, add on all of the rest of what folks have to deal with. And that experience, the absence of that experience, is very, very difficult. So yes, secretaries across the United States of America are very concerned. Now, as to their frustration with the Department of Justice, I will allow each secretary to speak for themselves. I don't speak for all of the other secretaries. Some may have had better experiences than others. But I can tell you right now, we are all very worried for the folks who work in elections in our respective states. We want to take care of them, and we want to make sure that they can feel confident that the Department of Justice, the FBI, and other law enforcement officials are going to have their back. In most cases, they do. But in this circumstance, I think the Department of Justice, which I distinguish clearly from the White House, certainly needs to step it up.
Mr. Secretary, given that most of, if not all of election activity is not governed at the federal level, it's governed at your level, at the state level, what efforts are you taking, as well as in coordination with other secretaries of states around the country, to work with state officials and to work with the state parties, which have a significant role in providing the kind of workers who show up at polling places and other people who have official positions on Election Day, to better coordinate and to better weed out the crazy and the dangerous? Because I see the leap to the federal, but at the end of the day, it really begins with what happens amongst and within the state community to deal with some of these issues.
Well, Michael, thanks for that question. And I think there's a very important piece of this puzzle here. This federal republic does have basic election administration happening, in many cases at a very, very tight local level. But it is not true that the states completely regulate elections. We have a whole slew, including the Voting Rights Act and the Help America Vote Act, of federal regulations. And we also have several federal crimes. Interference with election officials, to name one, is a federal crime. So much of this falls within the federal jurisdiction, particularly during federal election cycles. Look, Article 1 of the Constitution allows Congress to regulate our elections, regardless of what our friends on the far right say. And states do run many of the aspects of the mechanics of our elections with their state statutes. And then it gets executed at the end of the day at the county level. The bottom line is this: without that federal leadership, like we had during the civil rights movement, where local officials may not have been acting the best way they could, in this circumstance, local individuals may not be acting the way they should and should be pursued. The point here is the deterrent effect that does not exist. And I would challenge the notion that it all falls to the locals. Look, the Department of Justice has extolled the virtues of those 12 convictions they've had. So they know they can get involved. They have been involved. They need to do more. They need to step it up. And again, let me go back to this one very important point. This is not Joe Biden's problem. We don't want the president of the United States, who may be on the ballot, dealing with this, because that over politicizes this. It needs to be handled by Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, and the folks at the Department of Justice. This is not political. These are criminal acts. As you indicated, they are threats and violence against folks for a political end. That's the very definition of domestic terrorism. We need to treat it as such, and that's a federal issue.
Well, let it be known that a lot of us appreciate the work that our secretaries of state do in this space, along with other election officials. It's important work, and we thank you, Secretary Adrian Fontes, for being part of that work and being on with us today.